In this presentation, I think it's number 5 in our series. We're gonna talk about impact and measuring and disseminating your research impact and making sure that you are known to other people around the world, that your research, that your name, that your profile is known, is visible to other researchers around the world. Now, one of the main ways that that's done, as you'll see in this presentation, as you'll see a little bit later on in this session today, like one of the main ways that people make themselves known, there are many ways, of course, and we'll talk about some of the others in this presentation this afternoon, but one of the key ones is an Orcid ID. Now, I don't work for Orcid, I work for Research Square, I work with the Mars Training Network. The Orcid ID number, orcid.org, and we'll look in more detail about what these numbers are, how they can help you, how you can use them, how you can gain quite a lot of advantages from getting involved in this movement. We're going to be talking this evening about what is an Orcid ID and why should you use one in the context of steps to maximize your research impact. Make sure that you're known, make sure that your research, make sure that your publications are out there and are known by other people. Now, Naran mentioned a moment ago that in my research career, I published more than 300 academic articles. How's that done? Well, it's done by collaborating with other researchers. It's done by working with other people around the world, and you make yourself known, you make yourself available, you let people know about your great research by doing a number of things, including signing up for an Orcid ID number. Now, we'll come back to that in a moment. I'll explain to you about what Orcid ID numbers are, how you can sign later in this presentation today. I'll even share my screen and go into my own Orcid profile and show you a little bit about some of the things that you can use your profile once you've signed up with this system, things that you can use your profile for. But let's begin this session today by talking a little bit about impact. Impact, your research impact depends upon people reading your papers. It depends upon people finding your papers. It depends upon other people gaining access to the work, to the papers that you publish. Now, very important to always remember, as a researcher, out papers, academic articles, your readers have very little time to read articles. You know this yourself. Naran, I know, knows this very well. Very little time in the day to actually read academic papers. So people want to gain access to content. They want to read papers as fast as possible. And of course, people get frustrated if they struggle with understanding the work that you write, the papers that you put out there, the work that you publish. So many of the articles that people write, a lot of the work that people put out there, a lot of the work that people see every day in their feeds, in their streams of papers to have a look at, and have a read of, many of those articles are not going to be essential reading. So we do encourage people throughout this training to have a think about simple writing techniques that you can use to keep your English simple and easy to follow, and always bear in mind, of course, that many of your readers, most of your readers, will not be native English speakers. Now, as Naran mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, everybody will get access to a recording of this presentation at the end. You can fill in the spreadsheet. You can sign up for a certificate as well of attendance. And thank you for the comments. If you have questions, of course, if you have comments, we welcome those. Please don't forget to put them into the chat box up there on the top of your Zoom control panel. So your impact depends upon your readers, keeping your readers in mind at all times throughout the writing process of your papers. Now, this is me sitting in a hammock after my papers get published. What do most researchers do when their papers get accepted for publication? Well, most researchers, when their papers get accepted for publication in international journals, they don't do anything. And of course, this is a big mistake. As we talked about before in our training series, if you don't engage with your audience, if you don't talk to people, if you don't promote your research, one of the ways that you can do that, of course, is by signing up for an Orcid Researcher ID. I can hear somebody in the background. Does anybody want to jump in and ask a question? Please feel free. Unmute yourselves if you'd like to ask a question. I can hear that somebody is keen to do that. Does anybody want to ask a question? Make a comment? Say something. Of course, everybody's very welcome to get involved. If there's something that you'd like to comment on, if there's something that you'd like to ask about. Of course, most researchers, when their papers get published, they don't do anything. And this is, of course, a huge mistake, as you've seen before in other slides, in other presentations that we've put together in the course of this Mars Research Square Company training series. Your impact, the papers that you write, the research that you do is a journey. So have a think about your inputs. Have a think about what you're doing in terms of your activities, your outputs, your outcomes, and also there at the end of the day, how your work translates into impact. So I like showing this slide. It comes from Fast Track Impact. You can find that company online. You can find that company on Twitter. This would be a great image to cut out and use if you are putting together potentially a grant application or some other kind of statement to the government or to somebody else about how you might be able to present your work in the future. So what about your inputs? What about your activities? What about your outputs, outcomes, and impacts? This kind of thing feeds into a study of research impact over time. And of course, very important to think about your papers, your research articles as journeys. So not just something that you publish in a peer-reviewed journal and then sit back in a hammock and don't do anything about after it gets published. You should be thinking about the journey of your research impact. And of course, I'd also like to say, very important, when you get your papers published, and I'm sure you don't do this, I never did this either when I was a full-time academic. When the papers get published, at the end of the day, of course, it's always a bit of an ordeal to get through the whole publication process, to get through the whole peer review process, to deal with all the comments, to deal with all the suggestions from the editors and so on. So most people, and I'm sure that this resonates with colleagues listening to this presentation, when your papers get published, you don't really take the time to celebrate. You often feel that it's been a grueling and arduous experience, and thank the Lord that the paper finally got published. And it's just a relief to see the paper out there at the end of the day. I would encourage everybody listening to this to take the time to celebrate your achievements. When your papers get published, you've actually accomplished something quite remarkable. You've gotten original research out there through the peer review process. It's gotten published in a leading international journal. It's very important to take the time to celebrate and also to talk about your papers. So don't just do what I used to do. Don't just sit there and wait for people to find your published work. Promote your published work. How can you do that? Well, of course, international conferences are one way. Talking about your work on social media, all of those different channels that we use, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, WeChat, Instagram, for example, and also making sure that people know about your work and are going to want to write about your work by putting out press releases and talking about your great research in the media. So if you have a website, if you have an institutional or a lab group website, it's very important not just to wait for the article to get published, but also to talk about it once it gets published and to promote it both beforehand and after the fact. And that goes back to the slide that I showed you a few moments ago, where you talk about and you think about the impact of your research as a journey over time. So don't do what I used to do. sit back in the hammock, looking at the mountain, waiting for other people to find your papers. You need to promote your work. You need to talk about your work. That, of course, is how you maximize your impact. And of course, attending international conferences is something that we're doing a little bit more now that the pandemic is dying down. So if you're listening to this and you'd like some training on English communication skills or English public speaking skills or conference presentation skills, or how to put together a poster, how to put together a talk for an international conference, I would be delighted. Naran and the Mars Research Hub, the network, would be absolutely delighted to get involved with you or your university and talk more about how you can promote your published article, how you can network with researchers, and how you can use these opportunities to identify new trends and build collaborations. Because after all, publishing lots of papers, it's done by networking, it's done by collaborating, it's done by talking to people, and it's done by building those relationships and talking about your research. And Dina's saying we need another webinar about ResearchGate. Of course, absolutely. I'll show you a little bit about ResearchGate in a moment. We'll talk about ResearchGate in a few moments. But of course, I can provide you with videos. I can provide you with feedback and content, helping you to understand how to talk about and how to disseminate your research. Because, of course, one of the best ways to increase the reach and citations of your research articles, build your network, build your publication success, write all of those papers, end up with a few years in your career where you're publishing lots of papers every year. It's done by collaboration. The people that I know who write lots of papers, who are really making an impact in the field, and Naran will know this very well as well, collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. Of course, we must work together. We should work together. It's a great way to learn new things. It's a great way to build your networks, how to manage the peer review process, how to make sure that your papers have the best chance of acceptance, how to disseminate your research, how to build those networks, how to make sure that people are talking about your research. Collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. Indeed, in most fields, less collaboration. So if you work on your own or you work just with your own research group, you're going to achieve significantly less citation impact. And that's a study that was published in PLOS One in 2018. We found that international collaboration has a strong positive influence on both journal placement, journal selection, where you get your papers published, as well as citation performance in most disciplines. And that's a paper published in PLOS One in 2014. The data show that the more countries involved in the collaboration, the greater the gain in impact. Of course, if I publish a paper tomorrow and it's just Gareth Dyke on the authorship, then the only people who are going to know about that paper, unless I promote it, unless I talk about it, are going to be the people who are already in my network, right? But if I publish a paper with Naran, with Dina, with a bunch of other people from around the world, different research groups, we've got, let's say, 8 people on our publication, then of course, when the paper gets published, a much larger network of people, 8 authors have a much bigger research network than just me on my own. More people are going to know about the paper, more people are going to download it, more people are going to cite it. The more countries involved in the collaboration, the greater the gain in impact. So how can you be successful? How can you publish more papers? How can you increase your impact? One of the best ways, of course, to do that is to collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. So we do encourage everybody to get out there and talk about your work, build your networks. One of the ways to do this, of course, is with an Orcid ID. But here quickly is a question that we often get asked. Hey, Gareth, what are those little colored wheels that we often see next to papers that we've published? And here you can see one of those little colored wheels on the slide. These are altimetric wheels. This is a data science company that tracks where published research is mentioned online. It provides information back to institutions, publishers, researchers, funders, and other organizations who monitor this activity in real time. Maybe you've published a paper recently. Maybe you've seen these little colored wheels down there next to your PDFs online. Of course, if we track our impact factor, as we've talked about in previous presentations in this series, our impact factor, the impact factor of the journal, the impact factor of the paper, is something that gets assigned after 2 years. So the impact factor of your publication is a retrospective measure. Things like Altimetrics tell you your impact in real time. That number, 1036, recorded in the early part of the pandemic in March 2020, this shows you that on March 2020, this paper that actually had recently been published at that point had been mentioned in 50 news outlets, on 12 blogs, tweeted about 851 times, talked about on 10 Facebook pages, Reddit, video uploads, and citations in Dimensions. So it's a great way. Have a look at this. Google this, have a look at Altimetrics. Maybe your next publication in an international journal will be associated with Altimetrics. This is a way that you can measure your impact, the impact of your research in real time as the blogs, the Twitter feeds, the Facebook, Reddit videos, Dimensions, whatever, are picking up your paper. So there are ways in which we can track the impact of our papers in real time. Of course, Altimetrics has a database of public policy documents. They look at the mainstream media. They track more than 9,000 blogs, readers on Mendeley, social media, Wikipedia, other sources like citations on Scopus, and then this huge open syllabus project, syllabi from more than 4,000 institutions around the world. So there are ways that you can engage, there are ways that you can build your impact, there are ways that you can get people talking about your work, there are ways that you can measure your impact in real time. So we had a question about this a moment ago from Dina. How can you do this in real time? Well, another way is to get engaged on the different academic social networking sites, like, for example, ResearchGate. You can see my profile here. There I am, Gareth Dyke, terrible photograph. ResearchGate.net. Who has a ResearchGate account? You can use this to share research. You can use this to build connections. But of course, very careful with these kinds of accounts, and we'll talk about Orcid in a moment. We'll come on and talk about Orcid in just a moment, I promise. But if you are using one of these social media accounts, of course, depending upon the publisher in which your paper has appeared, you can see the major publishers here on the slide, you may have to wait until an embargo period has passed before you are able to upload the final version, the final published PDF of your article onto a site like ResearchGate. So for example, Springer Nature has an embargo period of 6 months. So after 6 months has passed, you're able to put the final published PDF of your paper onto your ResearchGate account. Springer, 12 months. Wiley, depends on the area, but 12 months for STEM disciplines, 24 months for humanities and social sciences. Elsevier has a range of embargo periods, but these are often journal specific. So don't make the mistake of building a ResearchGate page and putting up your published PDFs. You may have to wait until after the embargo period has cleared at the journal where you've published your paper. Now, one of the key things about this, one of the great things about this, and this is one of the huge advantages also of the Orcid system, academic social networks are great ways to disseminate and build an international reputation and build your CV without doing much work. I always encourage everybody to sign up for these accounts because it's a pain in the neck to have to keep track of all of your own outputs and build your own CV over time. Of course, sites like ResearchGate, sites like orcid.org help you to do this without you actually having to do all that much. So what this is all about is understanding the impact of your research. Your impact, of course, is your academic publications, as well as the difference that you make to society, as we've talked about in other presentations in this series, you are looking at project initiation, direct immediate results, intended impact, societal change based on the project outcomes, as well as medium-term results that relate to the project goals or aims. All of this is about building a reputation within your field. And Nada is asking, how can I participate in a research team to build my CV before graduation? Nada, talk to people, communicate with people, write to Naran, talk to the Mars research team after this webinar, send them your research area. They will connect you with research groups working in your area. You can get experience, you can get research training experience, you can meet people, you can connect with people, you can build that network that will help you in your future career. So we do encourage people to work with your press office, write a press release. If you feel that your research is newsworthy, start to think about how you can promote your research, how you can build that network, because of course, increased visibility leads to increased downloads and citations. We've got a responsibility as researchers to educate the public about our research, because of course, where does the money come from? It comes from the public. It comes from taxpayers, building support, funding our research. We do have a huge responsibility to talk about what we're doing, as well as to monitor and measure our impact as researchers. ResearchGate is one way. Google Scholar is another great way to build and measure your impact. Here's my Google Scholar page. You can have a look at building one of these as well. You don't have to do anything. You can just sign up. You can just have it populate your profile, building a CV. Rasha, Enas, everybody else listening to this presentation, you can build a CV. You can get involved. You can develop a CV. Nada, by putting yourself out there, these systems will build your CV for you, which finally you'll be glad to hear brings me on to talking about making submissions and why it's so important in this day and age to have an Orcid ID. Now, orcid.org, have a look at the website if you're listening to this presentation now. Ma was asking, is this recorded? Of course, absolutely. We'll be sending everybody a recording of this presentation as well as the slides at the end, so you can listen back. You can use my voice to scare the children, to put yourself to sleep later on, of course, if you want. So Orcid is a not-for-profit organization providing researchers with a persistent digital identifier that distinguishes you from every other researcher, and through integration, key workflows such as manuscript and grant submissions. Why is it important to have one of these? Well, in my country, in the UK, we've got lots of people with the last name Smith, with the last name Jones. In your country, in China, in Japan, in other parts of the world, you will have very common family names, very common last names. There might be lots of researchers working in your subject area with the same name. My name's a bit unusual, but let's think about common names. I'm thinking about some Chinese names, for example, where there are millions of people who may have the same last name. When people are looking for you, when people are searching for you, they need a persistent way to be able to find you, and you need a persistent way for all of your outputs, all of your projects, all of your grant submissions, all of your article submissions to be tied back to you. So have a look at the title of the paper that we published in 2020 up on the right-hand side of this slide, Imaging Techniques for Observing Laminar Geometry in the Feather Shaft Cortex. There's Christian Laurent. He's got an Orcid ID. There it is up on the screen. You can click on that ID. You can look immediately at his profile. You can find out what else he has been doing, what other papers he has published, what other projects he has on the go. So what is an Orcid ID? It is a unique researcher or institutional identification number that ties you or your institution, but in this particular situation, we're talking to individual researchers. You should sign up for one of these because it will enable me to find you easily. It will also enable you to build your CV without doing anything, without lifting a finger, without getting involved in too much, breaking a sweat. Your research outputs, your papers, peer reviews, grant applications, conference materials will be listed automatically on this profile. By the way, lots of journals, increasing numbers of publishers are associated with this system. When you make a submission, you will be invited to input your Orcid ID. It automatically collates all of the reviews that you perform, all of the papers that you submit, all of the grants that you submit and also review. As I mentioned already, one of the main ways to build your profile as a researcher internationally is number one, to be findable, but number two, to have an effective CV. And you can use these systems, Orcid being the number one approach to build a CV without really doing all that much work. So increasing numbers of researchers around the world have signed up for one of these, and you should too as well. So have a look at orcid.org. We can help you with the sign up process if you're interested. What this does, of course, is it provides a persistent digital identifier that distinguishes you from every other researcher. Very important if your family name is common, as is the case in many countries, in many situations, through integration in key research workflows such as manuscript and grant submission, supporting automated linkages between you and your professional activities, ensuring that you get the recognition that you deserve from your research. And why is that important? Well, imagine the next time that you write a grant application, the next time that you go for a postdoc or a job, you want to have a decent CV. You want for there to be a way for people internationally to find out about you, find out about your research easily. Academics use Google Scholar. Academics use ResearchGate. Academics use orcid.org to learn about you, to find out about your research, to evaluate you, and to decide whether or not they want to employ you in their institution. So register, add your info, and use your Orcid ID on your web page when you submit publications, when you apply for grants, and in other research workflows to ensure that you get credit for your work. We'll have a look in a minute at my account, but here is the login. So you go in and you think, well, I'm a person, so I'm going to sign up for a personal account. Leave the institutional stuff to your institution. That's absolutely fine. Sign up with your email, sign up with your Orcid ID. I'll show you what my account looks like in a minute. You log in and then you have a number of fields that you can fill in. Some of them you won't have to fill in. Your publication record, as I'll show you in a minute, on my Orcid account, completely automatically filled in by the system. You can see here that when I put this information in a few years ago, there were more than 6 million Orcid IDs and counting. You can put in your employment, you can put in your education, you can put in those invited positions and distinctions, you can put in memberships and service, you can put in funding. What does this remind you of? Well, it reminds me of an academic CV. Why do you need an academic CV? You need an academic CV because that's what other people are going to look at when you go to apply for grants, when you go to apply for jobs, when you go to apply for other academic positions. And so people are going to know about you. So it's free. It does an awful lot of the research and a lot of the data collection for you. Here's a screen grab of my publication page on the Orcid ID system. I haven't filled in any of the other stuff because that would involve too much work and I'm quite lazy, so I haven't put in my employment, I haven't put in my education and qualifications, I haven't put in those invited positions and distinctions, I haven't put in membership and service, I haven't put in funding, but it does populate all of my works. And Huda's asking, how can I communicate with other members? Well, you can use this system to search for other members, look for other members, and then you can either send them an email directly or contact them directly or use another platform to get in touch with them directly. This is a way to determine that the John Smith or the Anna Jones that you're searching for is the same person that you've just recently read a paper by. You can determine quickly and easily whether or not you are talking to, finding the right person for your research and for collaborations. And Nada's asking, how can I participate in clinical research with any interested professors here? Well, there you go. You've just asked in the chat, and I'm sure that any interested professors who are keen to give you some research experience, keen to help you with your career development, will just get in touch with you directly by clicking on your name there in the Zoom chat and sending you a personal message. What's great about Orcid, as you can see here, 146 papers of mine were automatically added to the system because it straight away searches Scopus, it straight away searches Medlink, it straight away searches Crossref, puts the papers in. You can go and you can accept them, you can go and look at them, you can see some of the recent work that I've done just there. It builds an academic CV for you without you having to do much work for yourself. So why is this important? Why is this a good idea? You can build a CV, you can build a network, you can build a profile without doing all that much work at the outset. And in addition, more and more journals, more and more publishers around the world are integrating with the Orcid ID system. I wanted to show you the inside workings of the journal that I edit. I've been editing this journal now for more than 17 years, but here's the inside workings of the manuscript central system that we use at our journal. It's called Historical Biology. So Ma was asking, is it a problem to publish for the first time in a good journal with a first time made Orcid ID? No, it's an advantage. It helps with the submission process. As I'm going to show you now, you put a lot of your information into the Orcid system. You don't have to re-enter that information into the journal submission system, because the journal submission system, as our journal, as this Taylor and Francis journal called Historical Biology, already integrated with the Orcid ID system. So once you log in to Scholar One or Editorial Manager or Open Journal Systems, the three main ways that international journals manage their submissions, you'll always have the option of logging in using an Orcid ID, so you don't have to spend loads of time populating all of that information. So here we go into our system. It's a paper that we published recently, this time in PLOS One. You can see again, there's my little Orcid ID on the authorship. You could click on that on the PDF. You could find out more information about me. You could find out more information about my publication. What this provides us with is a really effective, really great way to access information about individual people. And of course, people are asking about whether or not the recording will be made available of this presentation. Absolutely, we'll send everybody a link. How do I know that my idea is unique? Nuran, that's a great question. That's something that we've covered in previous presentations. I'd be happy to talk to you about that in more detail at the end of this session. Today, one of the things that we really need to do as researchers is come up with great research questions and then determine if those research questions warrant our time, warrant all of the work that we may need to do to answer those questions. So we do encourage people to have a look at this open access, open research wheel of fortune. How can you disseminate? How can you put your work out there? How can you tell people about your research? How can you show people that you're active? One way is to maintain your Orcid record. Another way is to share a preprint. And I do encourage everybody to go and have a look at the Research Square preprint platform. We are the largest preprint platform in the world. We are able to help you. We are able to increase your visibility, share your research with the world. So why not ensure that your published papers are as open to others as possible? Sign up and maintain your Orcid researcher identification number. Use a reputable preprint server like Research Square. Share your work online before, during, and after publication. Why is this important? Well, it sounds basic, but it's very important for search engines in particular. So in my career, for example, I've published papers using a range of different variations on my name. I've published papers over the course of my career as G.J. Dyke, Gareth J. Dyke, Gareth Dyke, and Gareth John Dyke. And I've not even changed my name due to marriage or something else. So just as one individual researcher over the course of my career, you'll find papers that I've published using 4 different forms of my name, which makes it hard for all of my research over the course of time to actually be associated with me. And you can see the point that I'm making here. It's very important that all of the work that I've published can be somehow collected together in one place. So we have some Chinese examples here on this slide, but one single person could be in the literature in a variety of different formulations. Indicate your name, indicate your family name. This is why it's so important to sign up for one of these unique researcher identifiers so that other people know about you, other people can find you, other people can cite and use your research. And when it comes time to apply for jobs, when it comes time to think about, getting a grant, for example, you're going to get credit by the search committee, by the organization assessing you for all of the work that you've done. And Summer is asking, how can I add my Orcid ID to my old published papers? This is difficult to do, Summer. You can't add it to papers that have previously been published. But once you sign up for one of these researcher ID numbers, it will collate all your papers together. You will get credit for the work that you've published in the past. So should I add a good updated CV? Well, as I've shown you on the system, there are fields, Rashar, where you can put in information. You can put that information into your Orcid system. So maintain it, keep your Orcid, your Google Scholar, your ResearchGate profiles up to date so that other people in your field are going to know about you and are going to be able to find you. So with that, I think it's time for me to hand back over to Nuran and the team as we throw the floor open and ask you if you have any questions based on what we've talked about today. My name is Gareth Dyke. Have a look at our company. American Journal Experts is the editing, the professional services side of our business. We provide English language editing, formatting, figure preparation, journal recommendation services. I'm delighted to provide you all with a discount code, Gareth10. You can go into our site, aje.com, and you can have a look at the kinds of things that we have on offer. So let me now pass back over to Nuran to see if anybody has any questions based on what we've been talking about today. Thank you so much for your attention. Nuran?
Thank you so much, Gareth. I really enjoyed the webinar, and I guess everyone had enjoyed it, right? Right, dear audience? Yeah. Gareth, one of the question we always receive from the young undergraduates is how to reach a professor to be included in a clinical research, because Mars is about medical research and so on. So they reach us from the medical background. Okay, so what would you say for them?
How to reach out to professors, how to get connected with professors? Is that the question?
Yeah, to be involved
Yeah.
in a clinical research, especially those
Yes.
who are undergraduates
Yes.
that have no scientific research education.
Well, I think the best way is to connect with a network like the Mars Research Hub or the IVPN network, one of these other networks that provide mentorship guidance and can help you to connect with people in your region working in your field. That's what I would say. And don't be shy about writing to people. Don't be shy about reaching out to people. Don't be shy about sending emails and asking people for that experience, because at the end of the day, that's the only way that you're going to get the experience, is to put yourself out there, show that you're prepared to do it, show that you're prepared to work for that experience, talk to people and write to people. I mean, what would you say, Naram? What would you say about that?
Yeah, I do agree with you, Gareth. I always say to them, don't be shy. And by the way, the idea of international collaboration had worked fine with me specifically, you know. So I do encourage everyone to reach and make this arcade number identification, and also a ResearchGate account. Talk to people. By the way, LinkedIn and Twitter also, you can share your previous work and talk
Absolutely.
about it and so on.
Network.
Right, Gareth?
Yeah, talk to people. Yeah, I mean, that's the best way to learn about who's working in your field and to collaborate. Absolutely. Yeah. Dina's asking about Mendeley. We've talked about ResearchGate. We've talked about all these other platforms. Like maybe it's a good idea for us to provide like a series of additional webinars to help people learn how to use Mendeley, how to use EndNote, how to use ResearchGate, even how to use platforms like LinkedIn and so on. Let me share with you we have a great resource that I'd like to share with you, which is our digital editing service, everybody. Like if you have a look at the link that I've been pasting into the chat, you'll be able to sign up for a free trial of our English language digital editing service, which is fantastic. You can upload a paper and you can get it edited and sent back to you over email, like within 10 minutes. So really, very good. People are asking about the link for the recording. That's going to be sent to everybody at the end of the presentation. Noha was asking about linking my Orcid ID with my Scopus profile. Well, that happens automatically, actually. When you sign up for an Orcid ID, the system links with all of your other existing profiles. So I do absolutely recommend that you do this. Yeah, great. So many questions, lots of interaction. Anybody else want to ask a question or engage or Nuran, some more questions?
I'm just receiving some Facebook comments that they are enjoying the webinar. It's very interesting, and they didn't pay attention that arcade number is really that important. So this is great. Thank you, Gary, so much for highlighting this topic.
Right, great.
Okay,
I
everyone,
actually
please.
I wanted to just paste something because I saw I stopped my screen sharing just for a moment there because there's been a very, very recent blog article that I saw published just today on the iospress.com site.
Great.
Tips for researchers and organizations to get the most out of Orcid. So let me put that there for you again. And I do encourage everybody to have a look at that. Tips for researchers and organizations to get the most out of Orcid. So quite timely that it came out today, which is good timing for this presentation.
This would be great. Yes, please do it.
You have it in the link, you have it in the chat box there, everybody. Don't forget to fill in the Google form to get your certificate. And I know that Nuran and the team will be sending everybody a link to the video, to the recording of this presentation. At the end
Yes, of course, we will send everyone. Please make sure that you are writing your email right in the Google form to receive your certificate, to get access to the free 30 days trial for the English editing, and also to send you all the links for the previous recording. So make sure that you are writing your mail right.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Anyone else have a comment or a question or something that you'd like to ask us today?
I'll get, please, Gareth, I'll get the links from you via WhatsApp, maybe, to send our audience. Okay,
Of
if that's
course,
okay with you.
absolutely. Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay,
My pleasure.
to include them in the mails.
Yeah, definitely. And this is an ongoing series that we're doing together. So if anyone in the audience has a particular question or something that you think we should do a webinar about, then please just get in touch with Nuran, with the Mars Research Hub. We can do training on lots of different things. So yeah, just get in touch. Thank you.
Yeah, Dina's asking, sorry, I lost the audio. What about the preprints? Actually, we had talked about the preprints. Would you just brief it in a few minutes Now, Gareth, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, preprints are a great way to share your research before it gets published in a peer-reviewed journal, actually. So it's really a fantastic thing. Like Research Square has a big preprint server. Other sites as well have big preprint servers, but these are really, really good ways for you to gain like lots of impact with your research. So the way it works is that you put your papers out once they're finished. You put your papers out onto a preprint server, and then other people from the community, other people from the research community can have a look at your work, and they can make comments on your work. And often the comments that you get back on the draft that you put up on the preprint server can help you to improve the study in the future. And also, very importantly, lots of journals, lots of journal editors look at preprint servers, and they come to those preprint servers and will invite authors to submit papers to their journals. So that's another great way for you to gain impact. We have a webinar on the 31st of March, 3 p.m. UK time, I think it is. I just put the Zoom link there in the chat box. If you'd like to sign up for that webinar on the 31st of March, you'd be all very welcome to join us. Do have a look at that. We've got a webinar in which we're going to explain in a lot more detail about preprint servers, about how you can use them and how you can gain a lot of advantages for your career and for your institutions ranking from the use of preprint servers. So do have a look at that. I just put the link there into the chat box. I hope that that helps, and maybe we'll see some of you for our free webinar, 3 o'clock UK time on the 31st of March. Anyone else like to ask a question? Or Naran, it's time for us to close the session today. What
Yeah, I guess so. I guess we had reached an end. So I appreciate your efforts, Gareth. I always appreciate it. Thank you, Gareth, so much for this interesting, amazing webinar.
Thank you
Thank
for the
you,
chance
dear
to do it.
audience, and please join us for more and more webinars, bi-weekly webinars. We will set a new schedule for Ramadan webinars. I will talk to you, Gareth, later on about Ramadan and the Muslim fasting and all this, so we can
Great.
work together to make it work.